Many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm going to jump into the big news of the last couple days, and that being Roseanne's show being canceled, Roseanne's tweet. And it really got to me. Just how the mainstream media was covering it, and how many people that supposedly, were her friends or, even her co-stars, and basically most people around her just automatically, she's stupid, evil, I can't believe she said racist things. And how the media covered it, her racist tweet. And I honestly don't think she put it out there in a racist way. I think the context of how she was saying it was not in a racist way. I think she was ignorant to that part of it. She evidently isn't now. How the mainstream media covered it. But I honestly don't think she was trying to put it in a racist context. I think she was taking a shot. She didn't think through what she was saying, and that it would be viewed as a racist comment. And, I have plenty of black friends, Hispanic friends. I'm farthest thing from racist. I try to empower people. I don't care what race you are. I don't even care, what gender or, non-gender. I don't care nothing about any of that. I'm someone that focuses on the individual. And when it comes to Roseanne, I really do think that she has a lot of conflicting ideology. I really don't think she has an ideology. I think she just looks at everything, certain ways. Every individual thing she goes, oh, this is my first thought, that pops in my head. This is, my first feeling that I have about it. I don't think she really thinks through a lot of things, but I don't, dislike her because of that. There's a lot of things she said, have done throughout the years that I completely disagree with. I don't think a lot of it's been smart or educated. But that I think that's why a lot of America likes her, is for the simple fact is she's just she's probably the closest celebrity that people really know that is normal. And that can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. But it really did amaze me how quick her show was to be canceled. Well, there was already a story that had been out that ABC had already asked her, for season 2, let's not make it, so pro-Trump. Let's try to get politics out of the show. We don't want it to be that political. At the same time, ABC will put a show like, The View on television, where you have a whole bunch of lefties and a progressive disguised as a conservative, being McCain. And all of them are anti-Trump. Whoopi's been famous for having the showing the T-shirt with Trump's, face on it, and I'm not even going to say on air, but despicable. It really was truly despicable. And even though I really don't hate people, there are people that I do believe have no moral compass and are despicable in how they act. That doesn't mean I hate them, but I wouldn't want them around me, my family. I wouldn't want them living in my neighborhood just for the simple fact that they're despicable people. They incite hatred and violence. I don't want that around. And, I'm pro-gun. I have a lot of 3%ers that, associate with me. Well, I don't care who associates with me if they have a moral compass. They can have a whole different political view. They could be 100% pro-Trump or 100% against Trump, where I'm somewhere in the middle. I look at individuals and the individual things they do, and I analyze it. And I go, what's good about it, what's bad about it, what's pros and cons, and I really analyze everything. And I tend to analyze so much that it literally affects my life to a point, because I want to be as educated as possible on something before I speak on it. And that doesn't always happen. There's always, that was a lie, or that, here's some more facts that were hidden. And that will change my perception on things. But I'm analyzing. And there's no really analyzing on, what was the context of that tweet? What did she mean by that tweet? Well, a lot of people on The View have said despicable things. There's not really much analyzing. They're pretty 100% open when they make these comments or make these gestures. And they still have a show. And how many despicable things that they've done, how much hatred they spew, how many lies they speak. But she puts out one tweet and they go, it's racist, get her off. Well, they wanted her off because she was making a Trump supporter more relatable, I believe, to people on the left or people more in the middle. Where her show actually tackled feminism. It tackled biracial couples. It tackled, so many different little issues. The one episode tackled, Muslims that moved in next door. And that related to people on the left and in the middle, and they were seeing it from someone that was a pro-Trump. And really one of the things I noticed on that show too, again, I rarely watch TV, and when I do, I start analyzing things, which a lot of times leads me to turn the TV back off. But I was kind of a little captivated by it, because it really, like when it came to the Muslim thing, it really goes, hey, this is a Trump supporter. This is a preconceived notion that maybe someone on the right might have about a Muslim neighbor. And then it humanized that Trump supporter. They're really not just, they have preconceived notions of, that Muslim that moved in next door with all the fertilizer, but really showed compassion towards the end, because, that person was, their card was rejected, and Roseanne was there in line and, covered it. And the cashier made some remarks that were negative towards her, and, the Trump supporter Roseanne called that cashier out on it and helped out that Muslim person, even though that, Roseanne had the, I'm afraid of him. Well, then on top of that, Dan, the man of the house, runs his own business, was completely, a union person, which that relates more to what the left. So, he's the union guy, and he's having to deal with, it's making us lose work being a union guy. And I believe it was the last episode they shown, he was having to find workers outside the union just to be able to compete, because they couldn't pay their bills. And it really showed a struggle of people in the middle, people on the right, and people on the left. And I think that show actually, even though, again, I have problems with, things that Roseanne said or things they do. There's things in the show I might have not agreed with 100%. But what I do think the show did was it was slowing down the divide in this country. It was humanizing people from all walks of life, all ideologies, all viewpoints, and it was bringing that together. It was bringing people together, where I actually seen it, where you would have more conservative people talking with more liberal people about the show. And you would see them smiling at each other and laughing and understanding each other a little bit more, which I think threatens exactly what the left is trying to do, which I believe it's the left and the progressives on the right, but mainly the left that is actively trying to divide the country. And again, the progressives on the right side of the aisle, they've been doing the same thing. But the thing about the right is now that party's changing, and a lot of people are afraid of the change. It won't be conservative no more. What it seems to be doing is actually taking conservatism and interjecting a little bit of libertarian. You know, you got the Freedom Caucus that stands up against the progressives that seem to always go along with the left, but you never see the left go along with the right. That's because they tend to have the same agenda. And don't forget, you know, I had one person, you know, look at, you know, the country now under Trump, you know, it's becoming really racist and all this. I go, well, racism existed. And actually, if you really want to look at it, when did the Black Lives Matter start? When did the rioting start? When did all this happen? Well, it was under Obama. I said, since Trump's been in office, you might have seen protests, you might see, you know, some outbursts, but are you seeing the cities burn down anymore? That leads me to go, hey, that might have been coming from, you know, the stand down orders and all that. That might have been a little bit more politically motivated from the top down. Because the burning of the cities seemed to kind of calm down, even though maybe the hatred and the violence in certain little areas might still be there. The TV riots and, you know, Ferguson burning, that's kind of calmed down. So I really believe that this was really more not, you know, if ABC wants to remove Roseanne because they believe she was being racist and what she said, okay, you're a private company, do what you want. But don't tell me you did it because of that. Don't do it because you say she might be inciting hatred or racism or violence. Don't be honest about it. You did it because you didn't like the message of the show. You liked the ratings, but you didn't like the message of the show. It wasn't doing what you politically wanted to do, even though you put feminism in there. You put a little boy that dresses as a girl. You know, you show all these, maybe a liberal lean to it. But Roseanne being Roseanne, she put that spin on it that you didn't like. Because if it was about racism, hatred, violence, any of that, you wouldn't have The View. There's other shows on ABC Network that have spewed hatred towards the right or white people. You've had that racism there. It just wasn't your style racism. So, you know, let's be honest about that. But ABC won't. I don't like the hypocrisy and the double standard. That's the crap that really annoys me. And people go, well, you know, the right, you know, basically pushed the NFL to ban kneeling by the players for their, you know, their stance. No, the right didn't do it in the sense that you say, or Trump didn't do it in the sense that you're saying. The market did it. The NFL was allowing it. The NFL did not plan on standing in the way of it. What happened? Their attendance went down. Their ratings went down. The free market did it. I always tell people, exercise your voice through the free market. And the right has a problem with that. I really come to learn the right has a problem with the, being big boycotters. But that's really starting to change now. But it's still not the way the left is. The left will not only do protest and all that, which you don't see much from the right, they will actively boycott. You combine those two, and it's really pushed people to react to it. It doesn't always work. Look at Hobby Lobby, but it's worked in a lot of circumstances. The right doesn't seem to do it the way. You don't see a lot of people on the right standing outside of a store because the store, did something wrong. They don't do die-in protests where everybody walks in and falls on the floor and disrupts the flow of business. But I think it's going to come more from the right than we've seen in the past. I really start seeing people like, I'm not, for Roseanne's politics. I'm more conservative, but the way that, the View and all that acts, and ABC has no problem with that, but then, they'll turn around and immediately, drop Roseanne. When anybody that knows Roseanne and some of her stuff, she stood up for minorities a lot in ways I don't agree with. She's more of a socialist, Marxist type person. And I think that's where some, people on the right have got it wrong. Oh, she's a Trump supporter. She's one of us. And not really. But I think what it's done is lessen the divide. And for that, I would be grateful. Doesn't mean I agree with her politics. Doesn't mean I agree with her views. But the humanization of every side, where we stop going, you're a leftist, you're a rightist. You go, oh, I kind of agree with that, or I disagree with that. But that doesn't mean I have to hate you for it. As long as you're not trying to make me do something, cool. We're cool. If I see you need help, I'll help you. If you see I need help, you'll help me. I think we actually can lose a lot of the nonsense political ideology when we do that. When we humanize each other, I think that's actually where more libertarian ideology, not politically, but ideology, where you go, you do you, I do me, and, we can be friendly. But that really hurts, when they try to do their anti-gun stuff, when you go, well, I don't like guns, but my neighbor's a gun owner, and that dude's a pretty straight-up guy. Well, he's a gun owner, and you're supposed to be in. Well, I don't want guns in my house, and I don't like the fact there's a gun over there. But the dude's always nice, always willing to help me out. I could go knock on his door right now and say, hey, help me move a couch. And he'll be like, okay, I'll be over a second. I think that's what we need more of. So yeah, that's something I wanted to cover. I really don't think it was a intended racist remark. But because of the nature of it, it's going to be viewed that way no matter what. But again, back to the hypocrisy. If you don't want that to be used because it can be viewed as racist, then don't use it at all. Don't ever say a white person, a Hispanic person looks like a monkey or an ape or anything. Don't be a hypocrite about it. Well, it was never used as, yeah, but it's used as hateful. Whether it be racist or just hateful in nature, why should it matter? It shouldn't. If it's used in a hateful way, well, I'm not going to stop calling Trump a orangutan. Well, then don't expect other people to stop. And that's what the First Amendment allows. And again, this isn't a First Amendment issue for the simple fact it was a company that decided to cut connection. It wasn't, the government came down and told ABC to, cancel a show and get rid of it. That would have been a First Amendment problem. But I do think the show has positive effects, and maybe another network might pick it up. Maybe it'll hit some type of streaming where people can watch it. I think it's going to hurt ABC. ABC has no credibility, like most of the mainstream. But what I've noticed as of the cancellation of the show, I've actually noticed people on the left go, nah, this is bull, that's not what she meant. I followed Roseanne for this long, and she agrees with me on almost everything. She's always, stood up for minorities and pushed my socialist agenda. There you go. ABC just shot themselves in the foot. And I think the free market will react to this. And people that were around her know her. Jumping on the racist bandwagon when they know her, I think that right there shows their character. I've never been a big fan of Wanda Sykes. I think she's, been funny and at points, but she's an extreme hypocrite too. I don't like those type of people around. I don't put my money towards those type of people. I don't put my viewership towards those type of people. And I've let them know it through different means. Whether I was part of what is it now? I can't even think. Nelson's rating. They started sending me packets, wanting me to rate things, and I let them know, exactly how I felt. That most of the time I don't watch TV because of the hypocrisy. The media, I think, is going to learn their lessons soon. People are tired of it. Roseanne show was a way for people to come together. People to have that, even though they would pit their, anti-Trump, Roseanne's sister, Hillary supporter, end up voting Gary Johnson, and Jill Stein, Green Party. I think all that really had a positive effect on the country. Even though I'm not, a Roseanne supporter on the personal level. I am not a big Roseanne fan. But the show, I think, was a positive thing. But again, that's ABC's choice, and They might have just shot themselves in the foot over it. But I do want to move along here. I had one clip here I wanted to get to. If I can get it up. Sorry. Give me a second. Okay. It's loading right now. I have a Ron Paul Liberty report. I'll speak on this after. But it's in Korea, Kim and Moon embrace. No need for outsiders. So we'll get into that.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing very well.
Yeah.
We want to spend some time this morning, today on Korea, because of things going on there. It never ends, but might be a little bit of good news there. But before I do that, I want to just update the audience with some of the news that is obviously very important for the European Union and what's going on economically. So there is a bit of excitement. It has to do with Italy. Italy has off and on been on their last legs many times, but they are in trouble. I don't think they like to be in the euro and getting dictates from other countries. I don't think they like NATO telling them what to do, or the IMF. But obviously they're in financial trouble. And last night there was an awful lot of excitement because they're fighting over an election or popular appeal to the populace in opposition to those in charge. And this has caused havoc with their bonds and interest rates. And it hasn't just remained with Italy. There's nobody that stands alone in Europe. So because Europe is a mess, it's back to the argument of the euro. It reminds me of the big thing going on before Britain, got out of the euro. And this is coming up. So the markets were very rocky. They're affecting our market. Last time I looked, the stock market, the Dow was down 375. And even though gold didn't skyrocket, all other currencies actually were selling off and going to the dollar, because in spite of the dollar's problems, the dollar's better than most of the other. But gold has held its own and has been up. So it is acting as a haven. But there's lots going on there, and we won't go into too much detail on right now, but it is big in the news. It's affecting our markets because we have investments over there, and the banks are hurt, and oil is hurt, and also it's in combination with how we have gotten involved with breaking the agreement with Iran, because the Europeans like that agreement. So you add all that up, and it's chaos. But the most important reason why there's chaos is all of the debt that exists, and the fundamentals are off base. All the malinvestment occurs, and there has to be corrections. So all it waits for is an excuse to do that. And right now, that is the excuse. And we'll probably talk on this later on as well, because it's going to be around a while. We'll see if Italy drops out.
It's fascinating because it's an economic crisis, as you mentioned, but it's also a really significant political crisis, because you had recent elections that were won by a left-right populist coalition, the Five Star Movement on the left and the Northern League on the right. They were able to form a majority government, and then they sent their list of ministers to the president. The president holds only a symbolic office. He only approves that which the people have voted for. And they sent an economics minister who was a Eurosceptic as their choice, reflecting the will of the people. And the president said, no, you can't have him. And so it really has led to a political crisis, and it reaffirms really all of the arguments that the populists have made in Italy, which is, hey, Italians, your votes don't count.
Yeah. I think they're trying to correct it, and obviously the big problem is the economic system of Keynesianism and debt and fiat money. So it'll have to be resolved, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that again. But on Korea, we have a picture I want to start off with, because I think the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words, is pretty true. There we have a picture of Un and Moon, South Korean and North Korean leaders. And it doesn't look like they're getting ready to go to war. I mean, it looks like they're pretty good diplomats, and it looks like, why don't we listen to them? Why don't we let Korea be Korea? And they've, they had a meeting a couple months ago, and they agreed denuclearization of the peninsula, and also signed a peace treaty. Let's get this behind us. Remember, it was the United Nations that really pushed the United States into that war, and we've been over there, and technically the war's still going on. But I think what we see here is the reflection probably of the people. If both of them thought that they're going to be run out of office, because of their friendliness with the opposition, it would be impossible to believe that, because I think they've worked hard and continue to work hard, and this situation is sometimes made bad by the outsiders. Mm-hmm. We have the United States lining up against China, which happened very early on in 1950. But I think conditions have changed, and I saw the first breakthrough here from the South Korean people that I could visualize. And that is, they have often wanted to go to North Korea and visit their relatives. Mm-hmm. And then they elected Moon, who was sympathetic to their views.
Yes.
And then the Olympics, the breakthrough there, and then sister came down there, and she was a delight, and it was really a breakthrough. And then, the others chime in and say, oh, look what we're going to do. Maybe we can bring about peace. Peace will come when this picture lives up to its reality, and the others get out of the way. And it hasn't been too long ago when I made a suggestion. Somebody said, well, what would you do? Well, how would you handle it? And I would say, just let the North talk to the South, and let them work it out, and then inform China and inform the United States. Of course, that isn't the way the world works, and they have to realize that. There's too many special interests. But I just think it's a delightful picture, and I think that that's what people should remember, and that it's not impossible to let diplomacy work. It's just too bad that wasn't permitted a long time ago, and our government was very adamantly opposed, to any overtures. And, even a couple of weeks ago, they still had war games there, practicing how we were going to invade and take over all North Korea militarily. So we haven't given enough. We haven't given away, as if we have to practice World War II type war games in order to maintain our power, when power is much different. But anyway, I think that is a great picture. I think that they should be leading the charge. And if there are Johnny-come-latelys and say that, this is good and take credit for it, fine and dandy, as long as they move in this direction. But this should have been done a long time ago.
Well, the picture is compelling, and the backstory is, I think, equally compelling, because the timeline here is important. We had the Olympics, which I think were the first breakthrough, and then there was a lot of chatter, and then all of a sudden you saw Trump and Kim discussing a summit meeting, planning a summit. This was going to be Trump's singular achievement. He was going to show how it's done. And then the neocons, particularly John Bolton and the Vice President Pence, were talking about the Libya option over and over again. This is where Libya gave up its nukes, then it got invaded and their leader got killed. So that's not an attractive thing. It's a surprise, surprise. They weren't happy about it, and they said, hey, Pence is acting like a dummy by saying this. And so Trump got upset and canceled it on Friday. This is where it's compelling, though. What happened when he canceled it? The world didn't end. They didn't start rattling sabers. simply the North and South Korean leaders called each other and said, let's get together and talk this out.
They were the adults in the room.
Yeah.
And it's going to be followed up now. It's acknowledged by our administration that the Vice Chairman Klo is from North Korea, is going to New York and assuming meet with Pompeo and getting the stage set for following up on the meeting that got canceled all of a sudden. So that I think is good too. But who knows? I don't know. We when we were looking for blame on canceling that meeting, we looked toward the recent appointment of John Bolton because he never wanted it and despises this movement. He probably still does. But in this day and age, a week of not hearing from somebody is almost like you've been excommunicated. And we haven't heard too much from him. But I wonder if there's a little contest going on with a Pompeo that becoming more realistic versus a John Bolton who doesn't seem to be realistic ever.
And that's the real movement. You're right. The U.S. is sending some diplomats to North Korea to help plan this out better. Kim Young-chol, who you mentioned, he was the former head of intelligence for North Korea. Now he's the vice chairman of the party. But now he's heading to New York to potentially to meet with Pompeo, who he met with when Pompeo was in North Korea. So now things are actually being set in motion in earnest after this embrace, after this meeting, after they showed what could happen. And as you suggest, I did a little Google search before we started. John Bolton with the parameter of the last 3 days. There's no John Bolton's name coming up. He's essentially disappeared. I don't know if it's significant or not. Maybe President Trump has put a leash on it, but he certainly tried to make his own boss look bad, in my opinion.
Well, denuclearization is very important. If I had my personal way, there would be no nukes in the world, and the world would be better off. That's not going to happen. There are a lot of nukes out there. But if we waited till the countries that have nuclear power until we agree on denuclearization, why don't we denuclearize the Middle East?
Yeah.
That would probably be helpful. There'd be less threats and intimidation. What about dealing with China? What about dealing with Russia? And even Pakistan, they have it. India. So the weapons are very important. The worse the individuals are, the more danger there is. But it's the people you have to deal with. If all of a sudden, for some reason, Canada thought, well, we don't know where the United States is going to be, but we want a little extra protection, we're going to have a nuclear weapon. If our relationship has remained the same, we're not going to worry about it, even though there'd be no reason for them to have it. But I think that when you set the goal of denuclearization and say, well, we're not going to do a thing until we can inspect every inch of ground in your country and find out that you don't even have a piece of paper that implies that you'd like to build something, that is missing the whole point. I think the image that we were looking at is the image that people should think about, and I will get criticized for this because I'm unrealistic. They're getting along, but that isn't the way it really works. I mean, these are our bitter enemies, and you have to realize that you can't ever give an inch to a country like Iran or any other place. And yet, I think it goes to me in a little way back to the gun issue here. It's not the guns that kill; it's the people that kill. And it's not the weapons that causes wars. It's the politicians and the government that cause the war. So there's a big difference between that. Even though I wouldn't want somebody to think, well, he will just unilaterally disarm and not pay any attention. But I think this obsession with spending 30 or 40 years on trying to keep somebody from getting a nuclear weapon or pretending that they have it, and they never even have one, and yet continue to say that we have to treat them as if they want one and might get one, and do that for decades, and that's just a cover for trying to remain antagonistic and enemies with those people, so the American people will say, yeah, they're dangerous. We got to do it. Saddam Hussein, he was on his way over here, and he was going to nuke us all. And it's more propaganda that they use, so we should have a little bit of more moderation in their language.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, I think what the neocons were doing was trying to construct kind of a straw man, in a sense, for our negotiating position with North Korea, which is that we need immediate denuclearization. Tell us where we back up the trucks. We're going to load your nukes. We're going to take them back to the U.S. Maybe we'll give you some money later on. That was their position. They wanted to stake out the extremist territory. And I saw a piece in the New York Times today from the former director of the Los Alamos lab, and he and a couple of his colleagues wrote a paper. They're the only ones that have seen the facilities in North Korea, so they're very familiar with the facilities, and they have written that this denuclearization process could take 10, 12, or more years because of the complexity of what they have built there. This isn't something where you turn the key, pull up the truck, and take away the nukes. So the question is whether this idea of a phased process is allowed to proceed through negotiations. That would mean sidelining Pence, sidelining Bolton, sidelining the others. And I think, we always look for a bright spot and a little bit of hope. I think Trump may have given us a little bit of an indication. I hesitate to be too optimistic, but he openly contradicted Bolton several times with tweets over the weekend suggesting that a phased denuclearization process may be acceptable to the U.S., telling Bolton and the other neocons step back.
And the other thing that would be so much help would be, a peace treaty, the DMZ virtually obliterated, and families coming together again, and the North Koreans being introduced, even with South Korea's shortcomings in politics, they did have more freedom, and they do have more prosperity, and North Koreans might say, well, we might like to enjoy this. So it's the hardliner in North Korea. They believe in their system like they believe in a religion, and they don't want that to happen. Mm-hmm. And there's some neocons that don't want to happen because their position is like a religion too, and they don't want that to happen. But this whole thing is so artificial that they have divided this country, and they're all Koreans, and if they saw themselves as one people, then I think this denuclearization would be, become less of an issue because the South would feel less threatened and the North should feel less threatened. And besides, they might want to spend their money on more for helping the standard of living.
Yeah, than for weapons. It's interesting. There are a couple of other tricky issues that this gentleman in the New York Times pointed out. Where to draw the line between civilian and military nuclear facilities. See, they do generate nuclear power that they use, and their missile program in North Korea, dividing between nuclear-capable missiles. And I was thinking as I was reading this, it's kind of interesting because this is a lot of what we're talking about with the Iran deal. Now, wouldn't it be ironic if President Trump found himself directly in former President Obama's shoes, arranging and negotiating a deal with North Korea that in many ways is mirroring the deal that Obama created with Iran?
I don't know. I'm sorry you brought that up because you know how politics work. Oh my Lord, yeah. I can't do it. I don't want to support something that Obama said. But that is one of the problems, and I think that's one of the reasons why we get more credibility because we're looking purely at the issues, and just because Obama had said something, that we have to reject it. So it is. And even though I make the point all the time that there's no real bipartisanship, but there's big struggles within the confines for power, and that's doesn't deal with parties, but the two parties, on policies they support each other. So it would be much better if we just looked at the issues, and I think that's why we were making an attempt that if a Democrat has an accident and does something right, we should praise him. Yeah. But what if the accident happens on the Republican side? Then we should praise them. And maybe they'll come up with an issue of free trade or low tariffs and a few things like that.
By accident. Well, I guess my conclusion, if we're there already, is really about Kim Jong-chol in a way. I mean, this is a guy who was personally on the U.S. sanctions list twice, forbidden from entering the U.S. because of all this sanctions nonsense. And here it turns out he may be a key to peace in the North, between the North and South and the U.S. So what does this tell you about the utility of sanctioning everything that moves, trying to put pressure? It's a foolish thing. The other thing that I would mention is, again, remind you that we are having a Ron Paul Institute annual conference in Washington, D.C. on August 18th. Tickets are going to go on sale very soon. I'm hoping by the end of today. Just had a couple of exciting new speakers sign up, and I'm going to let everyone know about that. But in the meantime, sign up for our updates. Go go to ronpaulinstitute.org and hit subscribe, and so we can send you our regular updates about a number of things, but particularly things like our conferences, keep you up to date. Your information is private and secure with us. It goes nowhere else, and we don't bombard you with spam. We're very, very conservative in what we send out, just the stuff that you need to know very infrequently, once a week at most. So do sign up. We'll keep you posted to the conference. Look forward to seeing you in August.
And Daniel, I don't think we have to worry about the issues disappearing. I think the contest between interventionism and non-interventionism, it's going to be around for a while. And some people ask, well, why do you work so hard if you don't think you're making progress? Well, I happen to think we do make progress. I think now that people have learned the difference between isolationism and non-interventionism, because the one thing is, non-interventionism, along with a libertarian economic policy, is anything but isolation, because we want to talk with people, we want to trade with people, and that's the reason that you're less likely to have wars. And this is the reason that I am always keeping my fingers crossed and hopeful that the fact that Russia right now trades a lot with the Europeans, that this effort to perpetuate this antagonism toward Russia will finally quit. But here we're already talking about we need more troops in Europe because we have to know how we're going to, contest the Russians. The Russians are coming, and actually they're cutting back on their military expenditures. But there are people who are really bugging to send more troops there. Then if we don't do it, then of course they'll accuse us of being un-American and not supporting the troops. So I think that issue is still out there. It's going to remain. It'll probably remain throughout all history. But I am convinced that it's a plausible argument. It's worth working for, and the more or less intervention we have, the more likely we are to have peace. Why should people argue about peace and prosperity if you have a set of ideas that would promote that? Those are our goals that we have here at this channel, and I am so delighted that we have a lot of supporters that support these ideas. Please come back soon to the Liberty Report.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, you have people that Trump has around him that I think he put around him because he goes, well, these are people that, if I say so, they would not be afraid to act because, well, they're pro-military type people. But I think also at the same time he doesn't realize they, in a way, are influencing him as they are a pro-interventionist. And of course, if you try to counter any pro-interventionists, they want to go, oh, you're isolationist. No, I just don't think we should police the world. The Libya option, and with Bolton and even Pence, I'm from Indiana. I grew up in Indiana basically my whole life. Originally, I'm from Texas, but it's one of those deals that these are people that, in Pence's case, that, he's justified in what he does because it's somehow right. They never look at the whole picture. They never look at the bigger picture. Oh, you want to, free North Korea. That doesn't mean that the Korea Peninsula all of a sudden becomes united. You can get something a lot worse. Definitely when you have a population that has really been cut off from the world, and within that population, just like here, there are pro-government people. And you can see that when you do see the people that are trying to get out of North Korea. There was the one of the military guys that drove the Jeep across the border. Well, not all those people that are in the military want to be there, but there are pro ones. And had one guy, oh yeah, all across the border. Oh, they'll shoot at them, but they won't hit them. Well, no, they'll shoot them. If they were really against it, they would, maybe fire their weapons because they don't want to look like they're traitors to the leader or their country, but they would purposely miss to, allow that person to get away. So what you might get out of North Korea with the Libya option, which I'm sure they know exactly what happened with the Libya option. I don't think that's going to be an option. I think what they would do is say that we would commit to only, having a few nukes to protect ourselves. We won't produce more and more, but we'll make sure that our nukes will protect ourselves. So, I don't think it's a legit argument. Plus, I really do think that South Korea and other freer countries should be the influence. I don't see how us getting involved helps anything. Has it helped Libya? Has it helped Iraq? Has it helped, any of these other countries that we decided to get involved in? No. It's, Memorial Day, support the troops. I support freedom. I support people that want to protect freedom. But that doesn't mean I support the military. What I support is freedom fighters. And I know plenty of people that are in the military and were in the military that go, yeah, what we do over there is not justified. It's not right. It doesn't help us. A lot of them go, but, I signed up for it. I gave up my rights when I signed up for it. How about we have a military where people can volunteer? And then if you have a whole bunch of soldiers that go, this shit ain't right, I'm not freaking doing that. If you want to do it, you go and do it. I'm not. They shouldn't be punished for that. But that's not how standing armies or standing militaries are allowed to act. You can look at even World War II, Russians or Germans. What happened if their soldiers turned their back and started running away from a fight? Well, they would be killed. That ensured people did what they either disagreed with or what they knew were losing. That's how Russia lost so many people. They would have impossible fights that they knew, well, we're just going to throw everybody at them. Matter of fact, we're not going to give everybody a gun. Every other person gets a gun. Other people can hold some extra ammo. If that guy dies, which he probably will, then you can pick up the gun. Because it wasn't about winning the battle, it was about keeping the other army back. And that only works when you have enough people. That's why I if we had a United Nations that was actually interested in peace, they would start reducing standing armies. But no, what do they want? They want a United Nations basically backed army. Kind of like what the European Union did with all the sovereign countries that are no longer sovereign. We run your militaries now. I don't see any of this getting any better unless we really get a libertarian-minded president. But Trump surprised me on multiple things. You never know. Now, I want to kind of move on, but trying to figure out which direction I want to go with this. Give me a second here. Trying to load this article from Reason, and it's giving me some trouble here. I'll get it up here, don't worry. It was just something I really want to cover. It's kind of short coverage here, but something that came out of the Supreme Court that I think is definitely a big positive. And now it's up. Supreme Court rules 8-1 against warrantless police search in important Fourth Amendment case. The Fourth Amendment advocates scored a victory today when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 8-1 against a warrantless police search that involved an officer entering private property for the purpose of examining a motorcycle stored under a tarp in the driveway near a home, and physically intruding on the curtilage of Ryan Austin Collins' home to search the motorcycle. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, I can't ever say her last name, wrote for the majority in Collins versus Virginia. The officer not only invaded Collins' Fourth Amendment interests in the item search, the motorcycle, but also invaded Collins' Fourth Amendment interests in the curtilage of his home. The central question before the Supreme Court in Collins versus Virginia was whether the so-called automobile exception to the Fourth Amendment, which allows police certain latitude to search vehicles on public streets without a warrant, also allows the police to walk up a driveway without a warrant and search a parked vehicle in the area near a house. The court ruled 8-1 that the automobile exemption should not apply in this scenario. To allow an officer to rely on the automobile exemption to gain entry to a house or its curtilage for the purpose of conducting a vehicle search would unmoor the exemption from its justifications render hollow the Fourth Amendment protection the Constitution extends to the House and its curtilage, and transform what was meant to be exception into a tool with far broader applications, wrote Justice Sotomayor. Indeed, its name alone should make all this clear enough. It is, after all, an exception for automobiles. The sole dissent in this case was filed by Justice Samuel Alito, who insisted that the police had every right to engage in this sort of warrantless activity. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches. Justice Alito maintained what the police did in this case was entirely reasonable. The court's decision is not. The clash over the meaning of the Fourth Amendment should come as little surprise, since joining the Supreme Court in 2009, Justice Sotomayor has distinguished herself as both a leading critic of police conduct and an outspoken advocate of the Fourth Amendment rights. Justice Alito, by contrast, has emerged as perhaps the court's most dependable voice in support of law enforcement in such cases. So, again, even the automobile search on public streets exception, I think, is even still, again, against the Fourth Amendment. It's pretty. Fourth Amendment doesn't need exceptions. It's pretty laid out. Reasonable search. Well, there's a car parked on a public street, and I think it might have drugs in it. Okay, you think all you want. Get a warrant. Prove that there's reasonable suspicion. How easy it is for these officers to get warrants. How easily judges sign them. If you think there's something there, get a warrant. And guess what? If not, you think there's a drug dealer, he's got, his whole trunk full of drugs. But you can't show reasonable cause. You can't get the warrant. Or you're waiting for a warrant. Keep an eye on the car. Follow him. Until you got that warrant, you can't search that car. And that's how it should be. And what gets me is, even though there's that exception, you still can actually beat that exception. But a lot of times what that either requires is they'll impound your car, they'll bring a drug sniffing dog, which we know, and it's been proven that they give false positives a lot. You remember when they came out, it was all over mainstream media, they came out going, oh yeah, dogs can sniff out cancer. Yeah, sure they can. Why aren't they using dogs to sniff out cancer? Oh, because they still give false positives. Seen it over and over, false positives. So it's not a for sure thing. And I've watched people go, well, you can get a warrant. Well, I'll get a, dog down here. Okay, get a dog. Well, find out there's not a dog in the area, and they go, well, I'm just going to let you go, and I'm watching you. Cool, watch me. Watch me drive away. So, at least this helped in protecting the Fourth Amendment, but we still have a lot of room to grow when it comes to that. Now I want to get into another thing that's happening in the UK, and a lot of you already know Tommy Robinson. I have a clip here.
Hi, everybody. Stefan.
And you heard Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern, which right now, from what I've heard, Australia's trying to get Laura Southern banned from the country or something like that. But I want to kind of focus on, this whole Tommy Robinson and really why our First Amendment and why the freedom of speech altogether should be protected at all costs. Probably why you should keep your Second Amendment too. We'll get in this clip and we'll cover this.
Calling you from Free Domain. I'm here with Lauren Southern. She is an independent journalist and the author of Barbarians, How the Baby Boomers, Immigration, and Islam Screwed My Generation. And she will soon, imminently, just about to be releasing a documentary on the South African farm murders entitled Farmlands. You can check out her website at laurensouthern.net. We'll put the links to these below and follow her excellent Twitter feed at twitter.com/Lauren_Southern. Now, we have something great to talk about and something terrible to talk about. I'm a kind of good news first person, so we're going to talk about how Lauren and I are going to be going live in Australia. We are going to be doing a tour entitled Live, an Axiomatic event, and tickets are on sale now. You can check out the website at axiomatic.events. And the dates, this is 2018, so if it's 2019, well, I don't know, maybe we'll be back. But you can see us in Melbourne, Friday, July 20th, in Perth, Sunday, July 22nd, Adelaide, Thursday, July 26th, Sydney, Saturday, July 28th, and Brisbane, Sunday, July 29th, and early August, we're aiming for Auckland, New Zealand. It's going to be a fantastic tour. We've got great arguments, great information. There's going to be meet and greets, Q&As, and we are really looking forward to it. So just pause the video, go to axiomatic.events, pick up your tickets, and we'll see you there. With that out of the way, Lauren, my goodness, what a couple of days for you and your friends and people I respect. It has been quite something. What are your thoughts on what's happened with Tommy and others?
It's definitely just been a roller coaster the last little bit. Fun fact, in the background of the last couple of months, Tommy and I had been working on starting a big kind of media project together. And we think that people in the government, people started to find out about this project we were doing. We were talking to other producers. We were talking to film people. We wanted to set up a huge project to compete with the left-wing SJW propaganda in the UK. And throughout the creation of this project, which we were going to call The Front, I ended up getting banned from the UK. And then Tommy, of course, just a few days ago, put into prison. And this whole plan was just kind of shot and destroyed by the UK government, who don't want any dissident voices. And I think that's what this all comes down to. There are a ton of people who have theories that, oh, Tommy was just put in jail because he violated a suspended sentence, which I'm sure we'll get into the details of that later. But at the core of it, this would not happen to anyone else. No reporter who went and filmed a rape gang trial or any kind of trial, they would at least have a proper hearing. They would at least have actual few months to defend themselves. Tommy, in a matter of 4 hours, was taken away in a paddy wagon and sent to jail. And that is primarily because he was a dissident. He was fighting against the far left orthodoxy and the UK government, who have a completely different dream and vision for the country than the actual people living there and voting.
Yeah, well, you have free speech until you disagree with those in power in any way that affects their exercise of power, and then you find out just how limited you are. So for those who are not caught up, let's talk a little bit about the cover story. So Tommy is out there and he's broadcasting, and he has in the past got in trouble and got a suspended sentence for filming on or in court property. So he stayed away from the court property. He checked with the police that he wasn't on court property, and he was reporting his thoughts on the trials of these alleged Muslim rape gang members and so on. And then what happened was he did yell some questions at them, at these alleged criminals, as they were going into the courthouse, which you and I and everyone on the planet has seen reporters do basically since microphones and cameras were invented, and probably even before then. They were just yelling and writing down on a slate pad or an abacus. And then what happened was he was arrested for disturbing the peace, which is, actions, as far as I understand, it's actions that you take that might create or provoke imminent violence. So this guy wandering around a largely empty street in the rain, broadcasting his thoughts on criminal proceedings, that somehow gets translated into breach of the peace. And then he's taken, but the breach of the peace is not really dropped, but it's sort of replaced, because breach of the peace is not, like, it's a civil matter, and it has criminal standards of proof, so you've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So I don't think they would be able to get him much on that, but the judge, I think, said that he had violated this order to not film on the court property or in the court and so on, and then boom, there's no jury trial for that, and so he's off to prison right away.
So here's what's fascinating about that. What people need to know about the first case. First of all, why is Tommy going to these court cases and yelling at Muslim rape gang members? Well, the UK has a history of trying to cover up rape gang cases, whether it be the recent Telford case or, of course, the Rotherham case, where you've got thousands of young British girls being raped and trafficked, and the police are actively covering it up. And then on top of it, when you do have cases that are actually being investigated and there may be some actual justice that will happen, they put a whole media ban on it, similar to Tommy's case. So Tommy is always trying to expose these rape gangs that the government refuses to talk about. And he went to this case a while back where he was, of course, yelling and having arguments with the family members about how obviously these men are trafficking young girls. And he was given his suspended sentence. So they said, you can't be reporting on this case. But this suspended sentence was only for 3 months. It was 3 months jail time. They managed to get it suspended. But it was also at a court that was across the country from the Leeds court, which is where he was sentenced to jail a few days ago. So what this means is, while people are saying that Tommy violated his suspended sentence and for reporting on another rape gang case, that's why he was taken away and put in jail, that is not the case, because within a matter of 4 hours, he got 13 months in jail and was sentenced at a court that was across the country from the actual court where his suspended sentence happened and occurred, and where that whole process was taking place. That is completely out of the norm. It is not how this is supposed to go forward. There's actually supposed to be a proper court hearing. He's supposed to be able to have time to get a lawyer. It's supposed to happen at the court where the suspended sentence took place initially. And then on top of that, so the case that he went to the other day, they were very careful. He talked to his cameraman. They all had a conversation before going there. Let's make sure we don't violate this. We don't want Tommy to go to jail. So what we're going to do is just stand outside the courtroom, and we're going to talk about facts that are already out in the media, facts that have already been reported by the biggest paper in the city. I can't remember, something Examiner, but they just read out the names and the charges, already public information. And the only people there that were outside the courtroom were people that were friends with Tommy, 2 people that he knew. So how were the police called for a public disturbance? How were the police called for him potentially breaching the peace? There was no one there for him to breach the peace with. What I think may have happened is they have been watching his live streams and waiting. They've been waiting for something to get him on, because 7 or 8 police officers all showed up at once with a paddy wagon ready to take him away, just some BS reason to put him in cuffs. And then within 4 hours had a court ready. I've never heard of court proceedings going that quickly, and send him to jail within that time. They have been waiting to get Tommy on something. They've been waiting for a reason to put him away. He has been such a thorn in the side of the establishment in the UK that I really don't doubt that this has all been planned beforehand, and they were just waiting for Tommy to do something that would remotely violate the suspended sentence.
Well, this is, I think, astounding with regards to, thinking of the British people's respect for the law as it stands. What I can't help but think of, Lauren, is the number of times that Tommy has had death threats leveled against him, death threats leveled against his family, which are illegal. And like criminally illegal, not even just in a civil. Criminal death threats is a criminal action, and as far as I understand it, he has reported these repeatedly. He's even tracked down some of the people, and the police seems to have done nothing. And it's kind of hard, I think, for the British people as a whole, who, particularly the people who don't have a voice. I mean, Britain's still a very class-based society, and it's lower-class British white girls in general who are being targeted by these grooming gangs, these rape gangs. And they don't have much of a voice. And what they see is they see the police that failed to act for approximately 30 years when they got constant reports of these rape gangs and the preying on trafficking, torture, and just horrifying abuses of these young white British girls and boys. And so they see this not being dealt with for like 30 years and being covered up, and the mainstream media being complicit in this cover-up, because this could have been exposed in the same way that the Catholic clergy abuse of children could have been exposed. Is even easier. And then what they see is nobody dealing with the death threats that are raining down on Tommy Robinson, his family, his children, you name it. But then you see they leap into action and deal with him in a matter of hours. And that disparity is something that is not going to go away in the mind of the British people anytime soon.
That's another part of this that's absolutely shocking, is when the police got there and took Tommy away, the accused in this case that Tommy was reporting on were seen in the window pointing at one of the girls that was there with Tommy, doing this, like, we're going to cut your throat, kill you kind of action. So they requested, the cameraman and the people that were there with Tommy requested the police go up there and address this situation. Like, they're getting threats from the window. The police went up there, and there's this photo on Twitter, I can send it to you after this, where all the police are there and they're with the judge, and the judge is laughing looking out the window. They did absolutely nothing about this. And that was also the case apparently in the courtroom when Tommy was sentenced and sent to jail for 13 months. His defense, which they just he didn't have a chance to get a proper lawyer. They just assigned him one. And the defense lawyer even said, if you send Tommy Robinson to jail, he has a bounty on his head to be killed. He has very credible threats. Last time he was in jail, they had 500 pounds in cell phones, which are difficult to get in prisons, but they had these things as bounties for his head. They even found a concoction of, what was it? It was melted sugar.
Boiling sugar water.
Boiling sugar water that they wanted to throw in his face because it'll peel your skin off. And these are all credible things that were found to be true that happened in the last prison Tommy was in. So the defense lawyer said, if you send Tommy to jail, it's going to be a death sentence. And allegedly, according to people that were in the courtroom, the judge said basically he knew what he was getting himself into. So I like to think a little bit when I see the outrage outside Downing Street, the football lads saying, we want our freedom, we want you to free Tommy. I like to think that a little bit of the boiling blood of the British people right now, you knew what you were getting yourself into, UK government, pushing us a little too far. You knew what you were getting yourself into, you know? It's so frustrating, and I just wish we had more ability to get justice for this, but really the British government are standing on our heads right now.
And there's another contradiction that's been floating around in my head. I want to know what you think, which is that sort of the cover story for controlling reporting on criminal trials is the idea, well, you don't want to overtly or unjustly influence the jury. And I mean, of course, we've seen stuff happen in the American legal system where I'm thinking of like Harvey Weinstein, if it goes to trial, or, you know, all the way back to OJ. It's kind of tough to push back hugely against this idea that, you know, unjust or unfair reporting or just whatever's going on might somehow unjustly influence a jury. And, you know, whether they deal with this through publication bans, whether they deal with this through segregating the jury and not giving them access to the media and so on, it is a big problem, and it has become an even greater problem in some ways as a result of the sort of growth of the internet, growth of the new media and so on. So that's kind of the cover thing. And you know, that's a very complex area of law, and it's very challenging and so on. But what I don't understand is that if the idea or the argument is that, well, you can't publish information that might unjustly influence a jury, why would there be a ban on reporting on the arrest and incarceration of Tommy Robinson? because there's no jury trial for contempt of court. He will not get, as far as I understand it, the chance to state his case in front of a jury, to be judged beyond a reasonable doubt, to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury of his peers. So if there is no jury trial, and the whole idea of publication bans is to not unjustly influence a jury, how can there be a publication ban on the arrest and incarceration of Tommy Robinson?
That's what's so insane. And not even beyond there being no jury part. It's a ban on reporting factual, truthful things. You can't even just report the facts. So what this means is Tommy Robinson easily, if there weren't a few people feeding us information, he could have just been disappeared overnight. And I think that's what they wanted, because when they arrested him, they secretly added him to the court listings so that even his closest friends and relatives couldn't find out where the heck he was. It was just some anonymous internet, I guess, someone who was keeping an eye on the court proceedings that found his name pop up in the system and leaked it to a few people so they could figure out where he was. But the whole idea is no one can talk about it. No one can report on it. No one can tell you what's going on. So Tommy Robinson, any patriot, anyone who opposes this mass statism can just be disappeared in a day, in 4 hours, sent to jail, and no one will know about it. It's absolutely nuts. I love the Breitbart article that came out. I don't know if anyone saw it, but Breitbart, Mirror, Standard, all these different websites had to remove their articles talking about Tommy Robinson's arrest because of what the judge said. So Breitbart, in a kind of cheeky gesture, re-uploaded a picture with Tommy Robinson's face all blurred out and said, redacted, has been redacted, has been redacted. And they just have a whole article that says redacted wherever his name is and whenever there's any court details. And it really shows that 1984 vibe that there's that famous poster that says, we need freedom of speech because, and then the rest of it scratched out. Because we can't even know what the arguments are for any of this or against it if we don't have it. We can't even know what the arguments for or against Tommy are if you can't report on it. And the public deserve to know in this case. Absolutely. And certainly, like you say, when there's not even a jury to be influenced, the only possible explanation can be it's political. And they know people will be outraged over this injustice, as they should be.
Well, and Tommy was, while he was questioning one of these alleged criminals, was pushed rather aggressively. And, of course, the cops, well, we didn't see anything. It's like on video. And this is not being consistently applied. And this is the issue as well. So even if we were to say that there's a potential that everything the government did was legitimate and fair and right and good, they have a perception problem. They have a PR problem, which is that there's a lot of people in England who, they've read Tommy's book, Enemy of the State. They have followed his exciting interactions with the UK government. And there is a perception out there that he's being unjustly targeted and persecuted by his own government for his political opinions, for his opinions on Islam, for his opinions on immigration, for his opinions on a wide variety of matters. And so given that this perception is out there, if the government believes that what they're doing is legitimate, they should just call a press conference, they should invite everyone in, and they should just take all the questions. They've always told us, hey, you shouldn't mind being examined if you have nothing to hide. And so they should just open the gates and let everyone in to question them and explain everything that happened, and none of that is occurring. I don't imagine that press conference is imminent, and the reporting on the matter is being suppressed in a very totalitarian manner.
Yeah, well, you can imagine if this were the case of some kind of left-wing hero, like a minority randomly being shot or put in jail, that would become the top story on Vice and certainly every foreign media outlet, and the government would have some sort of massive press conference, probably a truth and reconciliation process to go through. There'd be comments from Justin Trudeau, from the whole world would be outraged, but because it's Tommy Robinson, unfortunately, he's just too spicy for the world to defend his freedom. He's a little too much of a patriot for us to care about that. The biggest thing that scares me here, though, and I think we've talked about this before, is when you get put in a position where you are being taken away and put in jail for your political opinions, where you'll even be killed in jail, like this man who threw bacon at a mosque. He was killed during his sentence because he was kind of in the anti-Islam crew, where you get banned from countries because of your political opinion, as I've been. what are the British people to do? They can't speak up anymore. They can't even listen to media telling them their opinions. When they disagree, it's not even just disagreeing with the state. When the state won't enforce the values that the people want, they voted to leave the European Union. They voted to have a culture with Western values. When the state won't even enforce the laws that the people want, what are you supposed to do? The only ending I can see to this is violence. When you're not allowed to speak, you speak with your fists. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that's an inevitable thing, and it's terrifying.
Well, it's funny because when you quote, was it John F. Kennedy's quote that those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable, when we say that the breakdown of the respect for the rule of law, the perception that the government is acting against the interests of the people. And, you know, if you're in England, you can't help but notice that Brexit seems to be taking years and years and years and years and years, and delays and concessions and years. But they want to take Tommy Robinson off the street. Boom, 4 hours, done and dusted. And when we say that if free speech is suppressed, if political opinions are disappeared, and we say this is going to escalate to violence, and people think that somehow we're rubbing our hands with glee or approving of this or think it's good. No. If you're a chain smoker, you go to your doctor and he says chain smoking is probably going to make you really, really sick, yea, verily, unto death. He's telling you that so you can stop smoking and avoid the outcome. So the predictions of violence and so on are not made with any pleasure, certainly not made with any anticipation, but made to say or put forward to say, let's avoid this if at all humanly possible, because once things get to that degree, then freedoms will be lost for quite a long time.
Yeah, it's just a fact. I can hardly, seeing guys that were in their 50s climbing up the gates of Downing Street yelling, I can hardly blame them. I can't. What else are they supposed to do? They have kids that are growing up in London that they know are going to be potential victims of terrorism, that they know are going to be potential victims of rape gangs. They love their country. They love their culture. They want to preserve that. And is that so wrong? Is it so wrong that they want to preserve the land and values that they grew up in? Every other culture in the world, every other group in the world, they're protecting their values and their right to have an identity is tantamount. We Vice, mainstream media, CNN, they talk about this all the time. We must protect their right to have a future in existence, all this. But for some reason, when it's the British people who want to do this, no, that's a little too far. And I understand the rage of these people. I am never someone who gets into scuffs or fights with the cops. I never push back. I always just do what they say. But I can't help but understand the guys who are completely outraged and doing these things. You've taken away their right to speak. What's your next move, government? It's going to be fascinating to see if this continues down this route, if people continue to be arrested, if Katie Hopkins or Raheem Kassam are taken away in cuffs next. If Tommy Robinson dies in jail, will that be the last straw? Will that set something off in the British people, something that we may not want to see, but will that break the camel's back? Who knows?
Well, we have seen, of course, in the past, when the perception of not even a majority, but a significant proportion of the population views their government as an occupying force that is serving the whims of those opposed to the wishes and will of the general population, of the domestic population, well, things get pretty heated pretty quickly. And, of course, it is our goal not to get there. Now, the other thing that's really fascinating is when these kinds of events float up, it's kind of, not only is it a trial balloon, but I think it bespeaks a certain confidence on the part of the government. In other words, if there was universal outrage, regardless of the content of Tommy Robinson's arguments, his data, his philosophies, or whatever, regardless of the content, if there was universal outrage at how he was treated for his journalism, I think the government would have recognized that they had gone too far, and they would have to back down, and they'd have to try and do some kind of reform, and all the things which would perhaps even open up free speech a little bit more. These things which are terrible can be turned into a positive if there's enough outrage and pushback over the actions of the government. But they must have been pretty certain that they could do what they did. They must have been pretty certain that not just the media in the UK, but the media around the world would avoid reporting on this story, that his story would be disappeared as efficiently as he was disappeared. And seeing this from the mainstream media, from the left as a whole, who have stood up for some pretty wretched people in the past, who have defended cop killers, who have defended thugs and criminals and communists. Well, but I repeat myself. I mean, the media has defended some pretty wretched people in the past. And the fact that they're not outraged and pushing back against this, I think has kind of shown the split in society, that they'll fight for their team, but they won't fight for anyone else's team. And that means that it's not principles that they're following. It's just in-group preference. And that is a really chilling thing to see.
During the 2016 election, we had the conversation a lot about how if Trump does not win this election, the Republicans will never win another election again, because there'll be so much immigration into the U.S. that it'll just keep going Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. They'll completely open the borders. And that's the turning point, it seems, that the U.K. is at now, where they've hit that threshold of we have indoctrinated enough people and we have replaced enough people that we can do whatever the heck we want. The British people, the actual patriots, the actual people with historical ties to this land who died to protect this little island, they are now a minority in the largest cities in the UK. So if we decide we want to imprison them for speaking up against our progressive, far leftist, globalist plans, well, we can do that now because they are no longer the majority. They are the minority. And how much more time do the British people, the actual British people with British and Western values, have to push back against this before they're replaced even more and even more and even more, and before they are indoctrinated further and further and further by these socialist policies? It's getting really scary right now. And I'm talking to British friends of mine who are saying, how the heck do I get out of this country? In fact, in Toronto here, I ran into two British guys who were, they noticed me and they're like, oh, big fan of your stuff. I'm so happy to be out of the UK. I was terrified being there. Is it an abandoned ship moment, or is there still a last chance to save it, in your opinion?
I wrestle with that question on a daily and sometimes middle of the nightly basis, Lauren. I don't know. I mean, one of the things that to me would have been a flashpoint for change was the emergence of these systematic rape gangs, largely perpetrated by immigrants, Muslim immigrants, a lot of them from Pakistan, that, according to some estimates, preyed upon, raped, pillaged, tortured, and trafficked tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of British girls over the last couple of decades. The emergence of that, because people think, oh, well, it's Rotherham, like it's just Rotherham, or it's Telford, or it's just Telford. No, the list of the towns wherein this has emerged just goes on in a depressingly long montage from hell. And if a people are not roused to action by the systematic torture, rape, and in many ways reproductive destruction, right? I mean, this isn't, to me, it comes across as an act of war to destroy young women to that degree, to the point where they may not be able to have children, they may not be able to pair bond, they may not be able to get married in any productive or efficient way. That is almost a genetic war against the domestic population. If that wasn't enough for people to do something, and again, the question of what to do is not my field of expertise. I'm a theoretician, so pragmatic and practical action is like I'm a blueprint guy, not a building guy. So the practical actions are sort of beyond my area of expertise, but I just remember thinking at the time, if that's not enough for change, I really don't know what is.
Mm-hmm. And that question of, because I remember watching, especially in 2016 when these terror attacks were happening constantly, every single month, I was like, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one that red pills the populace. This is going to be the one that makes everyone to stand up and say no more. And then it just kind of, there's outrage, then it fades away. Outrage, and then it fades away. We go back into our normal life. This is part and parcel of a big city. We'll just build more barriers. We'll surround Buckingham Palace and fences and gates and car stoppers. It's nuts. Last time I was in the UK before I was banned, going to the Christmas festivals that had these giant yellow gates surrounding them because they didn't want trucks to run you over. It's absolutely bizarre. And even here in Canada, I went to go see some fireworks a few days ago, and they'd shut down all the streets, and my Uber driver nonchalantly just kind of said, oh yeah, they probably don't want cars running over all the people. I'll have to let you out of the Uber here. And yesterday I was also walking through the street and saw a small Pegida protest. It was like 4 people, and they're surrounded by a gate and like 20 cops, and then there's a ton of Antifa on the other side. And that's what it feels like right now. We're facing a behemoth of media, government, educational propaganda against us. And to try to think of the steps that we can take to change this, I mean, we're trying to do this with the internet content, get the facts out there. People can't act on anything if they don't have the knowledge of what's actually going on. I guess all I can do is hope for millennials and Gen Z that they work their way into the institutions, much like the left did with their long march through the institutions, that they work their way into the communities and the education systems so that at least there's a fair balance of information. And maybe I hope there's no point being totally black-pilled. You might as well throw yourself into the ocean if you're going to do that. Sorry about the sirens out there.
Actually, I just wanted to point out that I'm never that comfortable when we're chatting and there's sirens in the background. I just wanted to point that out. Never good. Now, okay, so I was just saying in terms of solutions and so on, the one thing that has not been talked about, I mean, I've been talking about it for a while, and I mean, whether you agree or not, I'm certainly happy to hear your thoughts. I think that as long as people from the Middle East can make 10 times their income by not working, by coming to the West, that is so much of a pull, that is so much of a draw, that I don't see how borders are really going to work. I'm fine with borders, I'm fine with the control over borders, but I think as long as there's such a glittering prize in terms of the money that you can gain from domestic taxpayers by coming into a country, I can't see how borders are going to work when there's such there are bank vaults that are supposed to be impregnable, and people like just do anything they can to get in there. And so I think that one of the things that, I mean, I've talked about for many decades, even before I had a show, is the question of the welfare state and the question of the massive trillions and trillions of dollars of income redistribution that goes from domestic taxpayers to migrants to immigrants and so on. If that process continues, I don't see how protests are going to do that much. It's the old thing, like, I mean, if you leave a whole bunch of gold bars on your front lawn, people are going to find a way to get them, even if you have dogs, even if you have a high wall. You know, like, you have to take the gold out of public consumption, and then I think you have, because people who want to come to Western countries want to come to Western countries because they want freedom, because they want to be able to live in a society where church and state are separated, because they want economic opportunity, because they want freedom of speech. And I think that's great. You know, the more the merrier. But the problem is, because we have so much money that is being handed over, you know, talking to a guy in Europe, you know, like thousands of dollars a month and a free MacBook Air and internet access and free housing and free healthcare and free dentistry. If you have those kinds of prizes, you can't ever differentiate those who are coming to the West for freedom and those who are coming to the West for free stuff. As long as those prizes remain open to people coming into the country, I don't see any way to stop this. Human beings are responding to incentives, and the incentive is just so high. So to me, if I were to do something from that standpoint, I would say, look, the welfare state was a fine idea, but it's been a disaster. It's been a disaster for the domestic population. It's been a disaster for immigration. It's been a disaster for the budget. It's been a disaster for debt. It's been a disaster for marriage and pair bonding and just about everything you could conceive of. And it's kind of new in Western history. It was tried once before in England centuries ago, called Speenham Land, which people should look up. I did a radio show on this years ago, and it was a disaster then too. The forced redistribution of income is morally wrong and has horrifying consequentialities, which is why it was the church and private institutions that gave out charity before. Now, if there's any possibility to rouse public sentiment to do away with the welfare state and rely instead on charity and pair bonding and all the things that human society evolved to support in that way, then I think you can get something very solid done. But that is a pretty challenging case to make in the public square these days.
It's shocking how quickly we manage to destroy our countries. And like you were saying, welfare state, fairly new, mass immigration, fairly new. I mean, when a lot of our philosophers were writing their great pieces, they didn't have planes, trains, and automobiles to even take into consideration when they had debates about open or closed borders, whatever it may be. And I've always had it described to me in the way of like rolling out a carpet. It's really damn easy to roll out that progressive carpet and for it to go all the way down, but rolling it back takes a long time. So we have been able to introduce these new ideas to our society. We never did it in a conservative way where we just kind of dipped our toes in. Let's test the waters and see how this immigration thing goes. Give it 50 years, see what the results are. Let's test the waters, see how this welfare thing goes. No, we went all out. And this is a whole new crisis that we can't really look back in human history. I mean, other than, sure, we can look at kind of Roman history, the Gauls, all that, but it's still very different in the sense that we have weapons of mass destruction where just one of these people can get a machine gun and kill tons of you if they're bad, where we have planes that can bring in tons of people from way across the world who would never be able to come to that culture, who are hardly compatible. And we're facing this new problem as if it's going to go by, no problem, easy peasy, we'll figure it out. And it is not working out. It is demonstrably not working out. Here in Canada, where I live, even where people would say that multiculturalism has been the most successful, we are still, sure, multicultural is a good word because we are not one cohesive culture. We are not homogenous. We are all separated. They call it a mosaic, a cultural mosaic, where none of us are talking to each other or working together for the same goals. We're all working for our own goals. And parts of that mosaic are getting bigger than others and engulfing other parts of that mosaic. And it's not going to be such a pretty picture when it's just one color in that stained glass and one culture and one idea that has absolutely wiped out all the rest because it's a totalitarian one. And of course, that's happening at a far more rapid pace in the UK and in Europe, which I suppose is a bit of a white pill in the sense that much like Australia, where we're going to be speaking to soon, much like Canada, which is a little more screwed, and America, they can look to Europe and see what's happening in Paris, see what's happening in London, and say, maybe we don't want to go that way. And because we have that 10-year delay in a lot of other Western countries, maybe we can at least see the warning signs in Europe as it gets worse and choose a different route.
Yeah. I mean, I think of the people I know who had family members who were addicts and suffered horrible negative consequences, even unto death. And they were like, wow, I'm never going to touch alcohol. Wow, I'm never going to smoke because I've seen the outcome. And hopefully that can be sort of goosed into some sort of change, of course, because there's this foundational question. And it's a philosophical question, which makes it sound abstract, but I think it really is kind of at the heart of all of this stuff, is if we say diversity is a value, then we say, okay, lots of different perspectives are important. And I agree with that. But first of all, Europe was very diverse before mass immigration, lots of different cultures and languages and histories and religions and so on. So diversity just generally means non-whites. I mean, let's be sort of frank about that. But the question with diversity is a value, okay, so then we should say that diversity is a good thing. Then what happens when under the name of diversity you import cultures that do not believe that diversity is a good thing? Mm-hmm. If you say, well, respect for homosexuality is a virtue, sure, it is. What happens when you bring in cultures that condemn homosexuality? If you say equality of opportunity for women is a virtue, sure it is.
I'm going to stop it right there because there's a lot of issues in this whole clip. That clip goes further on. You can check it out. It's Stefan Molyneux on YouTube. Go check that out and watch the full clip. But a lot of these issues like the welfare state, diversity, all this stuff, not only has it affected how a lot of countries and here in America, in Canada, in Europe, it's not only affected the immigration. That whole leftist view has affected the left. And just like, he was talking about the whole philosophy of diversity. Okay, there was already diversity. But when you start mass or controlling one side of that diversity, then it becomes non-diverse and tyrannical. And the same here. And like I said at the beginning of the broadcast, I don't care if you're gay, trans, whatever. I judge individuals as individuals. But again, when it comes to that, the whole pro-gay thing, and the transgender, and I don't even know what LGBTQ, A through Z. I know a lot of people on the right that at the beginning they're like, you know what, I really don't care what you are, they were somewhat like me, where I rather just, take each individual as, who they are. But when you start pushing that upon people, where now, well, you can't say anything that could be even construed as homophobic, or you can't ever say anything that could ever be construed as racist, or you can't ever speak in normal language if it offends people. You can't own a gun because, well, that offends non-gun owner people that don't like guns. Or that's tyranny. And that actually completely wipes out diversity. Now you're becoming a tyrannical ideology. And even though I don't like when people say racist things, I don't like when people try to attack certain groups. And people are like, well, you talk about the left. The left is a viewpoint that I look at. It's not a group of people or individual, because there's a lot of people that claim to be on the left. I'm like, you're not left. You're not the same left that I talk about just because you vote Democrat. Guess what? Your views don't line up with the establishment left view. A lot of old Democrats don't line up with the new view. They actually find themselves somewhere in the middle, and some have even went right because, well, the socialists don't, represent you. And that's what you believe the Democrats are now, or socialists. Well, I wasn't a socialist. I was just for poor people and more freedom. And that's not what the left represents. Exactly. Let's talk about the leftist agenda that is current today. And that's with completely open borders, which as a libertarian, I like the philosophy of open borders, but not under a controlled situation. And that's exactly what we have now. If you think that if all the immigrants that were coming here illegally were more conservative leaning, do you think the left would be allowing it to happen? Absolutely not. And the right would probably do it. Well, you become hypocrites. Let's look at the individuals that come across the border. Because when we had less government intervention in everything that went on, guess what? The border, on our southern border, it wasn't guarded, it wasn't regulated, and people just dealt with each other. It wasn't until governments started fighting. Groups of people under government or military control started fighting to draw a border. And that's what it really comes down to. Is, okay, you want immigrants to come in. Well, immigrants would come in as individuals in a normal situation because they liked what your country represented. But under government control, they get free handouts, they get welfare, they get free health care. That's not a good enough reason to come to a country, to take from one person and, use it for yourself. Come into a country because you like the culture, the ideology, the belief system, the people. But now we got people that literally hate our culture, hate what we represent, but shoot, you're going to give them a house, health care, food, Wi-Fi, internet, laptops, tablets, and you're literally going to take it from other people? Well, guess what? You're destroying that culture. They love that. And that's not everybody that comes across the border, but you best believe that when they have the type of immigration policies put in place, a good percentage of those people are doing that. On the southern border here, on Europe's border, that's what's going on. You want to come to America because you like the fact that people can speak freely, even if it's not what you want to hear, but you're allowed to speak freely too and represent your beliefs. You're allowed to protect yourself and your family and your property. You like that idea because your country didn't give you that opportunity. That's why we should have immigration. And the less welfare, the less that you rob from one person to give to another, the easier it is to allow immigration. Because now you have people that are coming here for good reasons, not for handouts. And I don't think we could have open borders without getting rid of the welfare state. There is a problem, and it's not just here in America. It's worldwide. We have globalists that are trying to take down cultures that allow individuals to be individuals. I like volunteer collectivism, where people can get together and, share the same ideas, the same hobbies, the same passions. I don't like a collectivism that is governmental controlled, where, you all have to be a collective to represent 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you don't represent those 4 things, well, guess what? We'll lock you up, we'll imprison you, disappear you, kill you. That's not good for the individual or the society. It only helps the people that are controlling it. And if you want a really good representation of that, look at North Korea. Try to speak out. Try to defend yourself. Try to provide for yourself without giving to others, aka the government. We have something here called organizations, and if you've noticed, a lot of people become aware of organizations that don't give most of their donations to the cause. They keep most of it. Now they're being called out. They've been called out for years, and it's becoming more popular to, hey, don't donate to them. Their CEO made, $400,000 that year and only donated 10% of the donations to the cause. Can't do that with government. Free market doesn't get to speak within government. Definitely the more corrupt it becomes, the more detached from the people it's supposed to represent. it's time to become more active as libertarians or constitutionalists to protect the freedoms and call out the hypocrisy and use your dollar. Take care. Stay tuned.